Greetings, everyone. I figured that I would do a short video recording walking you through the PowerPoint on diagramming sentences. Apparently, the link I had posted wasn't working, so I thought, well, let me just re-record, repost, and see if that takes care of matters. So that's why I'm doing this. So I hope it does take care of matters. But let me share my screen. Where is it? Here we go. Now, I should point out that this is a PowerPoint presentation that was put together by someone else. I did not put this together. I tripped across it on the internet. And in fact, I think it was done in the 90s, and I'm not even sure that the person who actually created it is still with us. I think he might have passed away. But it's a nice PowerPoint. Now, it's a little gimmicky for me, and it's also more complicated than any PowerPoint I've ever put together because it's got little graphics or whatnot. So you'll have to bear with me as I go through the graphics and the sound effects and that sort of stuff, but the essentials of it are pretty good. All right, so again, diagramming sentences. So diagramming sentences, as I think I mentioned in some of my other notes, was something that was very popular in the 50s and 60s. I think they did a lot of that in grammar school and where they actually taught grammar in grammar school. Imagine that. But I know that grammar isn't much taught these days, and certainly diagramming sentences has gone out of fashion. So it was even going out of fashion when I was in school. So I was in middle school, I suppose, when I was introduced to it, but I happened to be, that 1 year only, I happened to be attending a parochial school, 8th grade, Sister Mary DePazzi, and she taught English grammar, and she taught diagramming sentences. But I had the feeling that my fellow students who were in public school are completely innocent of diagramming sentences and was never exposed to it. I actually found it to be rather helpful, and I found it helpful because of the first bullet here. It's a way of actually picturing the structure of a sentence. And when you start to see, and literally see with your eyes, that sentences have structure, internal structure, it makes some of the relationships between the words in the sentences more understandable, right? We gain a different kind of cognitive access to the internal structure of a sentence when we see the sentence diagrammed. So I think it really is useful, and hopefully you'll find it useful as well. Again, continuing on with the PowerPoint, by placing the various parts of a sentence in relation to the basic subject-verb relationship, we can see how the parts fit together and how the meaning of the sentence branches out, just as the branches of a plant ramify from the stem in space and in time. Again, fancy graphics. Most students who work at diagramming sentences derive a clearer understanding of how sentences work, at least that's the intention, as well as satisfaction of the pictorial renderings in the pictorial renderings of the sentences. Again, if you're a visual learner, I imagine that this is helpful, particularly helpful. This presentation touches upon only the basics of diagramming using the hyperlinks, but we don't have that in this presentation. But he had quite an extensive website on grammar and diagramming sentences and that sort of stuff. We're just borrowing this PowerPoint from him. Naturally, we'll begin with a very simple sentence. Glaciers melt. Now, he doesn't say this, I don't think, here. I haven't looked at this in a while. But the first 4 steps of a diagram, of diagramming a sentence, are always the same. Step 1, 2, 3, and 4 are always the same. Step 1, draw a horizontal line. Step 2, draw a vertical line which bisects the horizontal line. So now with that diagram, 1 horizontal, 1 vertical, now we have 4 regions, so 4 quadrants, right? The upper left, the upper right, the lower left, the lower right. And so the next step then is to take the subject of the sentence and place it in the upper left quadrant, and then to take the verb of the sentence and put that in the upper right quadrant. Those are the 4 steps of any diagram. frankly, when you're writing your diagrams for me, I'm going to pay most attention to those first 4 steps to see if you did those first 4 steps correctly. After that, it gets a little trickier. I want you to make a good attempt and to do well on those additional steps. But the first 4 are crucial. Vertical, no. Horizontal, vertical, subject, verb. So now we have a very simple sentence. And notice our sentence itself is just a subject and a verb. So this is going to be a very easy sentence to diagram. Okay. Horizontal line. Vertical line. Now he's done it a little bit out of order than I would do, right? But then step 1, glaciers goes on the left-hand side. That's rather step 3. And step 4, the verb goes on the right-hand side. And we're done, right? Why? Well, because every word in the sentence has a place on our diagram, and we know what every word in the sentence is doing in the sentence. And so now we have visually depicted the structure of the sentence. Again, it's very simple, but it works. Modifying words, including articles. Articles are words like and, the. Modifying words and articles go under the words that they modify on slanting lines, right? So adjectives would go under the nouns that they modify. Adverbs would go under the verbs or the adverbial clauses or whatnot. So that's how you find places for the other words in the sentence. So now we have a slightly more complicated sentence. The glaciers is melting slowly. The glacier is melting slowly. Ask yourself a couple of questions. What's the subject of that sentence? What's the verb of that sentence? What are the leftover words in that sentence? All right, that's what we have to find places for. So we draw our horizontal line, zoom. We draw our vertical line, zoom. We put the subject on the left, the verb on the right, and then we find places for the rest of the words. Again, he does things slightly differently, but those are the first 4 steps. Horizontal line, vertical line, subject on the left, verb on the right. But now notice we have some words left over. The doesn't have a home yet, and slowly doesn't have a home yet. So we have to find places on our diagram for the additional words. Well, the is an article modifying glacier, and slowly is an adverb modifying melting. So the goes under glacier, and slowly goes under melting. Now, if a sentence has a direct object, then that direct object goes on the horizontal line, but it's separated from the verb by another vertical line. But to distinguish the second vertical line from the first, the second vertical line does not go all the way through the horizontal line, okay? So the glacier is slowly destroying the forest. So again, ask yourself, what's the subject? What's the verb? In this case, what is the direct object? All right, once you have those, you can start building your sentence. Horizontal line, he's going to do things slightly differently. But there's our first 4 steps. Horizontal line, vertical line, verb on the left, subject on the right. But now we have words left over. The is left over, and forest is left over, and the other the is left over. So we have to find places for all of those words. Hopefully you saw the is modifying glacier. Hopefully you saw that slowly is modifying destroying, is destroying. But now forest is the direct object, and that goes on the horizontal line, but it has to be separated from the verb by another vertical line. But that vertical line does not go all the way through, okay? So notice the first vertical line is distinguished from the second vertical line because this one goes all the way through and this one doesn't, okay? But we're done. Every word in the sentence has a place on the diagram. We know that we have an article modifying glacier. We have another article modifying forest. We have an adverb modifying destroying. And we see that the glacier is destroying, active verb, and it's taking a direct object, the forest. Predicate nouns and predicate adjectives follow the verb on the horizontal line, but they're separated from a verb by a slanted line. The glacier is not really dangerous. Well, again, before you get into anything else, what's this a verb? What's the subject? Horizontal line, vertical line, subject on the left, verb on the right. Those are the first 4 steps. What goes on this line? Hopefully you see. It's the direct object. It's the article. Now, dangerous is not a direct object, right? Dangerous is a predicate adjective, right? It's modifying glacier, right? So I'm predicating dangerous of glacier. So that has to go on the horizontal line, but it's separated by the slanted line. Now, we have a word left over, right? The has a place, glacier has a place, dangerous has a place, is has a place, but not really doesn't have a place yet. So we have to find a place. What do you suppose that is modifying? Well, hopefully you see there, okay? So not is the adverb modifying is, it's denying it, and really is modifying or qualifying dangerous. Uzziah Budnick is a brilliant professor. I don't know who Uzziah Budnick is, but okay, so we have horizontal line, vertical line, subject on the left, verb on the right, but now we have professor. Well, professor is not a predicate adjective. Professor is a predicate noun, right? Nevertheless, it's separated from the verb by a slanted line. And hopefully you see on these words, underneath professor goes a and brilliant, okay? Now, with compound subjects and predicates, the sentence diagram begins to branch out. So we're starting to get a little complicated now. The professor and her colleagues are studying glaciers and avalanches. So notice we have 2 subjects, professor and colleagues, and we have 2 direct objects, glaciers and avalanches. 1 verb, however. So it is a little more complicated. The basics are the same, right? Subject on the left, verb on the right-hand side, direct objects separated by a vertical line, okay? But because we have, I think I'm missing a word. Yeah, there we go, okay? But there's the diagram, and again, it's a little more complicated. But nevertheless, you're seeing that the subjects are taking direct objects. Compound verbs are put on branches in a similar fashion. The professor and her colleagues are studying and classifying glaciers. So hopefully you see that in this sentence there are 2 subjects, professor, colleagues. There are 2 verbs, studying and classifying. And there's a single direct object, glaciers. Didn't mean to do that. There we go. Again, slightly more complicated, but you see that the basics are still the same, right? Subjects on the left, verb on the right, separated by a vertical line that bisects the diagram. And then the direct object is still on that horizontal line, but it's separated by a vertical line which does not bisect the horizontal line. Indirect objects. So notice Professor Higgins is the subject, gave is the verb, but what did she give? She didn't give students, right? That's not what she was actually giving. What she's actually giving is projects, and she's giving her projects to her students. Right? So students are the indirect object of Professor Higgins' giving. Oops. So notice, as an indirect object, it's modifying the act of giving. And so that's why it goes under the line. Right? But it doesn't go on the horizontal line because it's indirect object. We're almost done. But Professor Higgins studied glaciers in Antarctica during the 1950s. I found this sentence to be rather interesting, but I'll tell you why in a moment. Horizontal line, vertical line, subject on the left, verb on the right, seems to have a direct object. We put that at the end. Separate that by a vertical line that doesn't bisect, right? Professor Higgins studied glaciers. Now that's the rare bones of it. But now we have to place those clauses, those modifying clauses in Antarctica during the 1950s. Now this is how the person who created this diagrammed this sentence. Right? And it's perfectly fine as one way to diagram this sentence, but it's not the only way. And I thought it was somewhat surprising that the person who's actually writing this PowerPoint on diagramming and is very good at it wasn't more sensitive to the fact that he's given one diagram despite the fact that the sentence admits of more possible diagrams. Oh, there. Oh, I want to skip ahead. I'm not too worried about that. I'm not forbidding you to look at this in greater detail on your own, but we're not going to do anything this complicated, so. I don't know how to skip through it, so that's why I'm doing this. Sorry. But let's revisit the previous diagram. This is me. This is I did my best to keep the theme going here. Okay, so far so good. Oh, but where did Professor Higgins study? Did Professor Higgins study in Antarctica or not? Or were the glaciers in Antarctica? So Professor Higgins might have been in California studying glaciers that were in Antarctica. Now, when did Professor Higgins study? Did Professor Higgins study during the 1950s? Or did Professor Higgins study yesterday glaciers that were in the 1950s? I'm not as good as this guy was. So notice those modifiers could modify either this act of studying or the glaciers themselves. Therefore, the sentence is ambiguous. It admits of multiple reasonable interpretations. And on the sentence alone, I don't know what the person is actually claiming. They might be claiming any one of 4 possible propositions. The diagram exposes and makes more clear the direct meanings, right? So the diagram exposes why the sentence itself is ambiguous. I don't know how to make this stop. So maybe they both modify the act of studying. Maybe they both modify the glaciers. Maybe one modifies the glaciers and the other modifies the act of studying, or maybe the other way around. So again, that kind of, I think that finishes things up. Please let it finish things up. Okay, this is just him finishing. But I'm going to finish up by saying that's one of the reasons. Now, maybe he did it deliberately, right? Maybe he's just a craftier individual than I'm giving him credit for being. And he deliberately created a diagram that his students would go, "Professor, but wait," and then he'd go, "Very good, very good." So maybe I'd be getting a gold star for pointing out that there was more than one way to diagram that sentence. Further, you'll probably never diagram another sentence after you leave my class, and I understand that. But hopefully it's a way of visually depicting syntactical ambiguity, which is something we're talking about in this class, right? And tuning your ear for modifying phrases that may or may not be clear from the context or from the actual sentence, what's being asserted, okay? All right, so that concludes my little re-presentation of the thing on diagramming sentences. And we are done at this time. Thank you for your attention.